It's funny when you think about it. When you sign a standard contract out in the civilian world, right? Whether it's for, I don't know, a new car or a corporate job or even just a standard phone plan, there's this comforting expectation of defined limits.
Yeah, exactly. It's highly quantified. You know exactly what you're getting into.
Right, you give this specific thing, you get that specific thing. It's a completely closed loop. Your liability is strictly capped, and if things go sideways, you can usually just, walk away.
You can break the lease, yeah.
Exactly. It's clean. But then you look at the military oath. You step into the world of military service, and suddenly that closed loop is just blown wide open. It is essentially a blank check written to the nation, and it's payable up to and including, the value of someone's life.
Right.
And when you think about it that way, understanding how a society fulfills its end of that staggering bargain, how it actually protects the people who signed that check well, it becomes a mirror, really, reflecting our core values as a culture.
It does. It becomes the ultimate societal ledger. And maintaining that ledger, it requires constant, active maintenance. It is definitely not just a one-time transaction.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at exactly how a society balances that ultimate ledger. We're digging into a stack of recent updates from the Veteran Voice Weekly, and this covers June 15th to the 21st of 2026.
Got some really fascinating stuff in this batch.
We really do. And, whether you are a veteran yourself or you know someone who has served or you're just a deeply curious learner wanting to understand the mechanics of how we treat our service members, we are so glad you're here with us because we're tracking a very powerful theme across all of these dispatches today.
Yeah, a massive ongoing effort to protect what veterans have already earned.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer variety of ways that protection has to be applied in the real world. I mean, it's not happening on just one battlefield, right? It's a constant multi-front effort.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this pattern of defense starting right at the absolute foundation of civilian life, which is, the physical and financial reality of the home front.
Right. Let's start with the literal roof over your head. So the VA just opened this massive foreclosure prevention initiative on June 15th, and they're calling it the Partial Claim Program. And I got to say, the mechanics of this are wild when you look at how it actually functions.
It is a very creative solution, actually.
It is. Because if a veteran falls behind on a VA-backed home loan, the VA doesn't just offer them a standard modification. They essentially step in and pay the loan servicer the exact amount needed to bring that mortgage completely current.
But, and this is important, they aren't just erasing the debt.
Right.
That's the crucial mechanism here that we need to understand.
Right, exactly. The past due amount doesn't just vanish into thin air. Instead, it becomes a second lien on the home. But the second lien, this is the crazy part, it has 0 monthly payments and accrues 0 interest.
Which is huge.
You literally only repay it when you sell the house or when you refinance or, when you finally pay off the primary loan entirely. And it can cover up to 25% of the total loan balance or 30% if you used a COVID-era version of the loan.
Yeah, and the underlying logic of this mechanism is actually quite elegant when you compare it to what normally happens out there in the civilian market. Because, a traditional loan modification often forces a struggling borrower to refinance their entire remaining balance just to catch up on a few missed payments.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting and honestly why this matters so much right now for anyone listening. The biggest benefit of this partial claim program is that veterans get to keep their original, historically low interest rates.
Yes, that is the key.
Because think about it, so many people bought homes or refinanced a few years ago when rates were sitting at, 2 or 3%?
Exactly.
If you force them to refinance today just to catch up on late payments, they're resetting to today's much higher rates, which might be 7 or 8%.
Which completely defeats the purpose of trying to save them from financial ruin in the first place.
Exactly.
If losing your job or, say, having a medical emergency puts you 3 months behind on your mortgage, and the bank's big solution is to double your monthly payment by forcing a new interest rate on you, they aren't actually saving your home.
No, not at all.
They're just creating a slower, more agonizing path to foreclosure because that new monthly payment becomes mathematically unsustainable. Oh. So by freezing that original low rate and sidelining the past due balance into this silent zero-payment second lien, the VA is directly stabilizing the household's monthly cash flow. It basically acts as a financial shock absorber.
It is basically a financial time machine. It saves your house without throwing you to the wolves of today's borrowing costs. But okay, I do have to push back here on the reality of the timeline because looking at the sources, this program was birthed from the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act, which was signed into law way back on July 30, 2025. And the sources say the Urban Institute reported nearly 90,000 VA loans were seriously past due last summer,
Yeah, those numbers are rough.
with about 33,000 already actively in the foreclosure process. Yet the VA is giving private loan servicers until November 28th of this year to fully adopt this new partial claim program. Wait, if 33,000 veterans are already in the foreclosure pipeline right now, how is giving loan servicers until the end of November fast enough to actually save those families from losing their homes?
Yeah, I mean, it is agonizingly slow for the family facing eviction, without a doubt. It's incredibly stressful. But what you're looking at there is the brutal friction point between legislative intent and bureaucratic reality.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, setting up a financial safety net of this magnitude, it isn't just about passing a law and flipping a switch. It involves the federal government, obviously, but also thousands of private loan servicers and the intensely complicated secondary mortgage markets.
Oh, right, Wall Street.
Exactly. The delay between the law passing in the summer of 2025 and full implementation by late 2026, that is simply the time it takes to build the digital infrastructure, establish the compliance protocols, and iron out all those legal frameworks across all those different lending institutions.
So it's an IT and legal nightmare.
Yes. The November 28th deadline is a hard mandate to ensure the system actually works at scale, rather than just, collapsing under its own weight on day one.
I mean, that makes sense mechanically, even if it's really painful to watch the clock tick while families are waiting for relief. And, keeping our focus on the reality of a veteran's home, we're also seeing this defense play out in a very physical way for active duty families right now.
Oh, up at JBLM.
Yes, up in the Pacific Northwest at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, they just opened a brand new family housing community called Merriweather Landing. Liberty Military Housing moved the very first family in, the Morrisseys, they're a family with 4 kids, on June 19th. And we are not talking about a fresh coat of paint on a 1970s barracks here.
No, not at all.
This is a $130 million project resulting in 212 entirely new duplexes. They've got fenced yards, covered patios, 2-car garages.
It is a massive capital investment.
Yeah.
And to understand why this $130 million is being spent right now, we have to look at the history of how the military actually houses its families.
Right, because it hasn't always been great.
No. For years, there's been a heavy reliance on privatized base housing, and in many places across the country, that infrastructure severely degraded. We're talking about chronic, systemic issues, black mold in the walls, pest infestations, and just unacceptably slow repair times from the private contractors managing the properties.
Wow.
It really reached a crisis point where the living conditions were actively degrading the readiness and morale of the force.
Yeah, it got to the point where families felt like they were fighting a war against their own living room. So this Merriweather Landing project is officials stepping in and attempting a hard reset. And Liberty Military Housing also has another $107 million remodel currently underway for nearly 1,000 other homes in the new Hillside and Davis Hill neighborhoods on that same base. Representative Marilyn Strickland was actually at the ribbon cutting for Merriweather Landing and specifically called it just the beginning.
And when you step back and look at the VA partial claim program, and then you look at the JBLM construction side by side, you see this massive institutional effort to defend the home front from 2 completely different angles.
Yeah, that's a great point.
One is stepping in to save the complex financial structure of the home for veterans who have transitioned back to civilian life, and the other is physically bulldozing and replacing deteriorating, unhealthy infrastructure for active duty families.
So, but that physical and financial stability at home, it actually creates completely new vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Because once you have those benefits secured and you have that predictable government backing, you immediately become a target for people who want to siphon it away. You have to guard the gates. Yes, which introduces a much more insidious threat. The predators looking for a payout.
Exactly. Yes, the VA just had to issue a massive scam alert on Juneteenth about these incredibly official-looking postcards hitting mailboxes nationwide. They arrived stamped with bold text reading Veteran Savings Program and Do Not Discard.
I've seen pictures of these. They look very real.
If you just glance at them, they look completely legitimate. They claim you qualify for extra benefits, and they specifically name-drop things like dental coverage, Chamvia, or TRICARE, and then they create this intense, completely artificial urgency, telling you that you must call a toll-free number within 5 days or lose the benefit entirely.
Yeah, and before we get into the mechanics of the scam itself, it's probably worth clarifying those terms quickly for anyone listening who isn't steeped in military acronyms.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
CHAMP-VIA is essentially the VA's healthcare program that covers eligible spouses and children of veterans, while TRICARE is the massive healthcare program for actual uniformed service members, retirees, and their families.
Scammers use these specific, accurate terms to immediately establish credibility.
It is essentially a social engineering hack. It's like a Trojan horse wrapped in an American flag.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
They're using the veteran's own service record as the phishing link to bypass their mental spam filter. Because when a veteran actually calls that toll-free number, the scammers don't immediately ask for a credit card.
No, they play the long game.
They start by profusely thanking the caller for their service. They spend time building a deep psychological rapport. They're intentionally leveraging the inherent trust people want to place in institutions that honor the military.
The psychology there is incredibly manipulative.
Sure.
I mean, they get the victim nodding along, feeling appreciated, and feeling like they're finally getting an extra benefit they deserve. But then comes the pivot.
The trap.
Right. Once that trust is established, they ask for your Social Security number to, quote, verify your file. They ask for your bank details to deposit the funds. Or, and this is the neon flashing red flag of modern fraud, they ask the veteran to pay a small processing fee using wire transfers, retail gift cards, or Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. It's sick. They build you up just to empty your bank account. And the VA has had to explicitly confirm they will never add bonus money through an unsolicited postcard, and they will never pressure you to act immediately with a 5-day ticking clock.
This really highlights the critical thinking required to navigate modern information streams. No legitimate government agency, let alone the Department of Veterans Affairs, is ever going to ask you to secure your federal health benefits using a stack of iTunes gift cards or a cryptocurrency transfer.
Obviously. But in the moment, people panic.
Exactly. And the threat is so widespread right now that state attorneys general in North Carolina, Michigan, Iowa, and Pennsylvania have all had to sound the alarm on this exact mailing campaign.
Listen, if you are listening to this and you ever get a card like this in the mail, or maybe your parents get one, do not call the number on the card. You can verify any VA communication by calling the actual department at 1-800-827-1000, or you can report the scam entirely at vsafe.gov.
Yeah, better safe than sorry.
Always. And it's wild because we're looking at scammers trying to illegally strip away a family's financial security here. But there are also situations where families are fighting to protect their legacy from legal threats. Sometimes the danger to a family's livelihood isn't a scammer in a boiler room overseas. It's literally a line of code in the law itself.
That is a very sharp distinction, and it perfectly contextualizes the Love Lives On Act, which is currently making its way through Congress. This legislation addresses a deeply controversial rule known widely in the military community as the remarriage penalty.
So under current law, if a surviving spouse of a military member remarries before they reach the age of 55, they are financially penalized.
Heavily penalized.
They lose their dependency and indemnity compensation, which is often referred to as DIC, and it's basically the tax-free monthly stipend the VA provides to survivors of service members who died in the line of duty. And on top of that, they risk losing their survivor benefit plan payments, which is the annuity paid out to ensure the family has continuous income.
Right.
I have to admit, when I read this in the source material, I was just bewildered. The sources note that the average post-9/11 surviving spouse is only between 25 and 35 years old.
Very young.
So, under current law, we are effectively forcing a 28-year-old widowed parent to choose between moving forward with their life in a new marriage or keeping the primary financial lifeline their late spouse earned for them. How did a rule like this ever get written into law in the first place?
Yeah, well, to understand how we got here, you have to look at the historical and demographic context of how these survivor benefits were originally designed.
Okay.
Because if you look back at previous eras of conflict like post-World War II or the Korean War and now, the demographic curve of surviving spouses was somewhat different. And more importantly, the societal assumptions about marriage, women in the workforce, and financial independence were vastly different.
Oh, sure.
The law essentially treated the survivor benefit as a temporary bridge. The assumption was that the benefit was only needed until a spouse remarried and found a new, quote-unquote, primary provider.
Wow. So the law is essentially trapped in the mindset of the 1950s.
Precisely. But the demographic reality of the post-9/11 era fundamentally changed the equation. We relied on an all-volunteer force to fight a complex 2-decade war. This resulted in a distinct population of very young widows and widowers,
Right, people in their 20s.
people in their 20s and 30s, often raising small children alone with decades of life ahead of them. The idea that their late spouse's earned benefit should just evaporate because they eventually find love again decades later became increasingly difficult to justify.
So the Love Lives On Act, which is filed as House Resolution 1004 and Senate Bill 410, seeks to completely eliminate that age 55 penalty.
Yes, completely.
It would allow surviving spouses to keep those earned benefits regardless of when they remarry. And the sources say it's backed by more than 50 different veterans and military groups, and it would directly protect the financial legacy of close to 30,000 surviving spouses.
It's a huge deal for those families.
Well, wait. If 50 massive military advocacy groups support this, and it has obvious bipartisan momentum, I mean, the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee passed it in March, and a House subcommittee advanced it as well, how is it possibly stuck? Who is actually blocking a bill like this?
This is where we have to look impartially at the frustrating mechanics of how Congress actually budgets and passes laws. It isn't necessarily that lawmakers are actively voting against the core idea of supporting these widows. The issue is that the Love Lives On Act isn't moving as a standalone vote.
Oh, it's bundled.
Exactly. It has been bundled inside a much, much larger piece of omnibus legislation called the Take Care of America's Veterans Act. And that mega package contains 62 entirely different bills.
Oh, wow. So it's caught in a legislative traffic jam?
Just exactly. Congress operates under strict rules for how new spending is offset or funded. And right now, the funding mechanisms for that massive 62-bill package are unresolved. So the Love Lives On Act is temporarily caught in a legislative holding pattern.
That's incredibly frustrating.
It is. The moral intent of the bill has to wait while lawmakers debate the broader macroeconomic budget allocations of the entire package.
It is incredible to think about. I mean, a profound moral question, honoring a family's ultimate sacrifice and allowing a young widow to rebuild her life without financial punishment, gets distilled down into a line item waiting on a committee's budget resolution.
Yeah, that's the reality of Washington.
But that actually highlights something really important. Protecting the legacy of service isn't just about fighting these complex financial and legislative battles behind closed doors in Washington. It is also about how the nation publicly, culturally, honors that sacrifice out in the open.
Absolutely. The protection of a legacy requires high-level visibility. If the broader culture forgets the cost of that blank check you mentioned earlier, the entire societal ledger breaks down.
Right.
The public has to be constantly reminded of the human element behind the policy.
And this specific week in June brought two massive, highly visible events doing exactly that. First, NASCAR did something entirely unprecedented. For the first time ever, they raced on an active U.S. military base.
That was wild to see.
They went to Naval Base Coronado near San Diego and literally poured asphalt to build a custom 3.4-mile, 75-lap street course right there on the base to mark the country's 250th anniversary. You had seven-time champion Jimmy Johnson and former Daytona 500 winner Jamie McMurray driving.
Just massive names in racing.
Plus, they announced a massive exhibition race for November 11th, Veterans Day, that will feature Mustang Dark Horse Rs designed to honor all 6 branches of the military.
Just from a sheer engineering standpoint, it is a logistical marvel to run a high-speed automotive race in the middle of an active naval installation. But more importantly, it's a powerful cultural symbol.
And then, on June 18th, we saw the ultimate recognition of individual heroism at the White House. President Trump presented the Medal of Honor to 3 incredible men.
Yes.
Retired Marine Major James Capers Jr., who was actually one of the Marine Corps' first black special operators. The sources detail how in April 1967 in Vietnam, his recon patrol was ambushed. He was severely wounded. He literally fought through the ambush with 2 broken legs, directing his team and calling in artillery strikes dangerously close to his own position to hold off the enemy.
Incredible.
His Marines absolutely refused to leave him behind.
I mean, trying to mentally picture the sheer physical endurance, the pain tolerance, and the clarity of leadership required to direct a battle with 2 shattered legs is almost impossible for a civilian to fully comprehend.
Right. And then there's retired Army Major Nicholas Dockery. During a fierce firefight in Afghanistan in 2012, he repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire, rallying his force to protect wounded soldiers for 4 straight hours until medical evacuation could finally reach them.
4 hours.
4 hours of sustained close-quarters combat. And finally, the late Marine Colonel John Ripley. During the Easter Offensive in Vietnam in 1972, Ripley single-handedly destroyed a key bridge over the Qua Viet River to stop a massive enemy advance. He literally hand-walked 500 pounds of explosives out onto the bridge, dangling underneath the structure by his arms, completely exposed to intense enemy fire the entire time, just to set the charges.
His son accepted the award on his behalf. And it is deeply significant to note that for both Major Capers and Colonel Ripley, this highest level of recognition came more than 50 years after their actions in Vietnam.
Half a century.
Both of these Medals of Honor were upgrades from earlier awards. Capers had originally received a Silver Star and Ripley a Navy Cross.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Look at these two totally different events happening in the same week. We have Medals of Honor being upgraded half a century later to correct the historical record at the White House, and we have NASCAR literally building racetracks on active Navy bases for millions of viewers. Is there a deliberate cultural shift happening right now? It feels like an unprecedented push to bridge the civilian-military divide.
I think you are observing a very real, very intentional synthesis of history and modern culture. On one hand, the Medal of Honor upgrades represent a profound institutional commitment to getting history right.
Yeah.
It's worth noting there have been just over 3,500 recipients since the award's creation in 1861. These delayed upgrades are an acknowledgement that sometimes the initial chaotic reporting of a battle doesn't capture the full staggering magnitude of the heroism. Or, in some cases, it's about overcoming past systemic biases that may have downplayed a service member's actions. It is a meticulous, deliberate correction of the historical record.
And then the NASCAR event operates on the other end of the spectrum.
Exactly. The NASCAR event is about modern, massive cultural integration. For a long time, military bases have been somewhat sequestered from everyday civilian life. They are behind guard shacks and fences.
Right. You can't just drive onto one.
Right. By bringing a distinctly American cultural touchstone, like a NASCAR race, right onto an active base, it tears down that invisible wall. It makes the reality of military service highly visible and highly celebrated to millions of everyday Americans who might not otherwise have any daily connection to the armed forces. It's a very loud, very fast reminder to the public of who is holding that blank check.
Wow. Okay, let's zoom out and look at the journey we've taken through these sources today. We started with the very literal foundation of a veteran's life, the VA stepping in to freeze interest rates and stop foreclosures with this complex, new partial claim program.
Yeah.
We looked at the military pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into tearing down moldy, failing housing to build fresh, secure duplexes at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. We explored the psychological hacks scammers use to try and steal those hard-earned benefits.
The fake postcards.
Right. And the frustrating legislative gridlock stalling the Love Lives On Act, keeping young widows financially penalized for remarrying. And finally, we looked at the ultimate public honors, correcting 50-year-old historical records at the highest levels of government and roaring engines on a Navy runway to bring the culture together.
When you lay all of those seemingly disparate updates out together, it becomes very clear that they aren't just isolated news items.
Right.
This stack of stories is a real-time functioning ledger of how a country balances its checkbook of promises.
That's a great way to put it.
And is the real-world friction between what is owed on paper and how it is actually delivered to the human beings involved.
It really is. And, looking across all these sources, when you step back from the specific legislation and the individual headlines, there's a quieter, almost invisible variable at play here.
Which is?
Yeah.
Time. Yeah, time is the ultimate friction point in every one of these scenarios.
Exactly. Look at how time functions as the primary antagonist here. You have the ticking clock of a November 28th deadline for loan servicers to implement foreclosure protections, where every day of delay pushes a family closer to eviction.
Right.
You have the entirely artificial 5-day urgency created by a scammer, designed specifically to panic a veteran out of their life savings before they have time to think critically. You have that arbitrary age 55 waiting period imposed on a young surviving spouse, effectively pausing their financial freedom for decades. And then you have the 50-year wait for a Medal of Honor to finally accurately reflect the true weight of a soldier's actions in combat.
It is a constant grinding battle against the calendar.
It is. Time can either erode a promised benefit through bureaucratic delays and outdated 1950s laws, or if we look at Major Capers and Colonel Ripley, the long passage of time can ultimately reveal the true, enduring weight of a hero's legacy. It all comes right back to that blank check we talked about at the beginning.
It really does.
When someone signs that oath, they are giving the nation their time, and in many cases, all the time they had left. The question these stories leave us with is how efficiently and how honorably does the nation use its own time to pay them back?
That's a powerful question.
Something to ponder long after you hit pause. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.